where since the entitlement is individual, if a group activity has to be done, all the individuals have to agree and come to a kind of a social contract. Doesn't happen in a very formal way, but when a family pools money, it comes together and there is a need to build a consensus. That is where solidarity kinds of builds up. It can happen with the village also, that in a village, people can come together and build a community activity or a community enterprise which can build assets for the village, for the community, and also produce income for the members of the community. Now, the fifth effect that I have observed is what I call the cumulative effect. The cumulative effect is when all or some of the four effects begin to happen, they add up, and the cumulative effect is much larger than the individual effects. Now, for example, let me give you an example that you may give $10 or you may give $20 a month, but the value that you derive from this basic income is not $20 worth, but it's much more, because it is actually coming and joining into various other streams of change that is taking place, and there is a cumulative effect that happens, which is really the most powerful finding that came out of our study. So let me close by saying that the study that we have done, the pilot study that we have done in India, has thrown up many of these questions. You can either read the book or in the report. If you want to access, you can read much more detail about the four effects and the cumulative effect that I have spoken about. Now, I would like to close at the end to see in what way do you think this idea will apply to a country like Taiwan. I think that is something that you have to deliberate in this conference. At the same time, if we look at Asia as a whole, we are talking of a very diverse continent, where on the one hand you have a country like Japan, which is very wealthy. On the other hand, you have a country like Cambodia, which is very poor. Now, each country needs to work itself out, work this idea out, how it is going to apply. And I'm sure, I think some kind of working committee, some kind of a group, some kind of a team should emerge from this Asia Pacific conference, where I think we should start working together and share information, share ideas. And also, one important thing is that in each country, we need to do political advocacy of this idea. And how do we take the idea to the governments, and how we try to work with the governments in order to operationalize this idea, make this idea a reality. And I'm sure this is a very big event and a very landmark in the Asia Pacific zone to discuss this. And I would like to again give my best wishes to this conference. Thank you so much.
Can you hear me, Sarath? Are you there? Can you hear me?
Good morning.
How are you doing?
Yeah, fine.
Okay, so there's a lot of people here. I don't know if you've seen the Slido questions. First, before I start the Slido questions, are there any questions from the crowd? Anybody that doesn't use Slido? Okay, great. So we'll go through the Slido questions then. So, thank you for your presentation. Let's start off with the first question for the audience. It is, would UBI lead to the abolition of capitalism through increased household productivity and worker property ownership, or other means?
Hello, everybody.
Can you turn it up?
Can you hear okay, Sarath?
Yeah. I can hear. Is that the question for me, Taylor?
It appears so. It's got 2 likes, so it's the most liked question.
Well, I think, see, when you start implementing universal basic income in any particular context, how it unfolds and how what options it throws out is a question of the specific situation. But definitely, I think universal basic income and introduction of universal basic income definitely counters and affects the way capitalism plays out in any context. I would say that it actually has a redistributive effect on capitalism. That definitely I would say, yeah.
So the second question is, for the Indian case study, would you say that study is relevant to the Asia Pacific, and can you cite some reasons why or why not?
Well, I think on the question of relevance, I would only say that it is yes and no, because every pilot study has a certain universal aspect about it and a certain very contextual and specific aspect about it. To the extent that it is very specific, when you introduce the very idea in a particular context, I think the context throws up its own options. For example, as I said in the beginning of my talk, that in India, it is throwing up in the form of addressing poverty. But I think Finland is addressing through the question of unemployment. And I think Canada, Ontario is addressing something else. So I think each context will, that is the specificity, that what is the problem that universal basic income is going to address. So there is a certain urgency about certain questions, and there are other questions which are equally important. So I would say that any experience is definitely relevant to other contexts and other activists and other people to look into saying that what has this experience thrown up and what is that in our situation we should start looking at.
So the next question is, what is the UBI amount proposed for India, and what kind of purchasing power quality of life are you aiming for, full UBI or negative income tax?
Well, I think when we calculated, we went by the existing, at that time, 4 years ago, at that time, the poverty line as decided by the government. And we thought that basic income should be a proportion, 1/3 to half of what the government at that time decided as the poverty line or the poverty threshold. We gave at that time a certain amount of money, but I think in 5 years from now, if I would do now, I would pay double or more than that. So the calculations would be different now.
And what is that? Do you know what that is in US dollars?
When we gave about, I think, $4 or $5 US per person per month.
Wow. And that's all it takes. That's all it takes in India for a basic standard of living.
Well, I think the situation in India is very diverse. I mean, you have the remote rural areas and you have the metro urban areas. So, but if you go by the poverty line, I think $0.50 a day was that at that time the definition that if somebody earns more than $0.50 a day, I think he is not considered as poor. But that kind of definition ran into quite a lot of controversy. But nonetheless, I think it's more or less that. So if you give something like the World Bank poverty threshold is something like $1.9 US. So if you give anything like $1, $1 a day and calculate it per month, I think that would definitely have an impact on the poorer section of the country.
So the next question here is, can we identify who in society benefits financially from the 5 effects discussed and incentivize them to support UBI in either political or financial ways?
Well, I think the biggest question in India with 1.3 billion population is when you do the universal in a universal way, in a pure way, you run into a big problem of you are talking about a huge allocation of money. Something like about, even if you give small amount of money, it's going to be 10% of the GDP, which is kind of, blowing everybody's mind. So I think in that situation, is one's asking the basic question. That's what I said about the context throwing up questions. One is asking that where should we begin? Or should we begin with one demographic group and then move towards the universal in the long run? Or should we bite the whole thing at one go? Now the answer, most logical and sensible answer to that given by various people, proposals are, let's start with some group. Should we start with the most remote rural areas? Should we start with the tribal group, which is about 10% of the population? Then there was a proposal that should we start with only women population? Or should we start with women and children? So, these kinds of permutations and combinations are being thought out because of the huge population. A country with a smaller population may throw up different kinds of questions. Now the question is, who benefits most if there is going to be a hypothetical universal basic income? Is obviously the one who doesn't get any rate, who is parched, who is the poorest. He is definitely going to gain. And as I said, the cumulative effect for that particular category will be several times more than an urban person for whom this is just a marginal increase.
So I saw the discussion with Guy Standing, and there was a representative from India there, and the representative from India proposed the idea of loaning the money at 0% interest rather than giving a basic income, because he said that's more affordable. So I think that goes into the next question of is it affordable in your country? What is the fiscal impact of implementing a basic income, or how do you get there?